now, and good evening, and welcome to the talk this evening by Porasmita Bora. We are extremely fortunate to have her with us to talk about this timely topic, and welcome to the board members. I have a couple of people I want to acknowledge. Our other board members, in addition to Brian Dirks, Joan Waldrop, and Heather Dykstra, who's not with us now, but did some great work with us for a number of years also. And Porasmita Bora, though, who's going to be speaking with us today, is a professor at Washington State University since 2012. She is the Lester M. Smith Distinguished Professor in the Edward R. Murrow College of Communications. And in preparation for this talk tonight, I thought I would look and see what she has published. And it was an incredible list. And I would tell you how many things she published, but I was too lazy to count them. That's so many there were. I can't even imagine how much work she did to actually write them. And they're all interesting. They all are based on original research. And so it's not just sort of fluff pieces. So she really, and the research that she does deals with sort of the interesting intersection of journalism, information, and public opinion, among other things. And so she's the perfect person to address this. And so without taking up any more of your time, what we'll probably do is have just one more thing. Pora's talk probably be around 30 minutes. And then after that, we'll take questions. And so if you have questions, you can send them to me, send them to the WACT administrator in the comments. And then so I can then take those and either ask if you want to ask them or ask them myself if you would not like to, so we can take questions for Porasmita after her talk. So that I will turn it over now to Porasmita.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you so much, John. Thank you for that introduction. Very generous. I will quickly share my screen and all right. Okay, so are you able to see okay, perfect. Okay, hello everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening. And as John has already said, I work with the Washington State University, and today I'm here to talk a little bit about misinformation and disinformation, which I'm sure all of you have some sort of understanding, some exposure to it. And just to give a quick presentation overview, I will talk at first about how misinformation usually spreads. I'll talk a little bit about consequences of misinformation, why people might believe in misinformation, and what can we do about this problem. And so, but before I start with spread of misinformation, I wanted to quickly talk about how we hear a lot about these two terms, and I wanted to kind of differentiate the two. So misinformation usually is false information that is shared without knowing that it is fake. So if I share something on my social media and I do not know that it is false, then that usually is called misinformation. Whereas disinformation is something that is purposefully spread, knowing that it is false and knowing that it is sort of, when you hear about propaganda, that would be disinformation, because, and that makes it, more dangerous, of course, because you're doing it purposefully. Similarly, in this chart, that's what it talks about. So this information always has an intent. It is supposed to be, it is false, and the person who's spreading it knows that it is false, and there is that intent for that. Whereas misinformation is a lot of times can be innocent because you don't know that it is false, but you are still spreading it. They can be in all kinds of, give me text, images, videos, deepfakes, and it can be quite confusing sometimes with the kind of media ecology that we live in, because there is so much information, and that can be very, very confusing. So next I'll talk about, so I'll start with sort of how misinformation spreads, and there's research that shows that false information spreads more quickly and more likely to be spread than the truth, and it gains more attention. It's read by more people, shared by more people, talked about by more people, and so so it obviously becomes more dangerous. Social media definitely makes it easy for us to share, and for misinformation to be shared, and for it to spread. But I always mention this, that that doesn't mean that misinformation did not exist before social media. Definitely social media is a tool that makes it easy for us to share and spread, but there always has been false information before social media. Spread in other means, political propaganda, and history has lots of examples of such propaganda. So next, I'll quickly talk about a recent project that we got funded by NSF, National Science Foundation, where we study misinformation. In this project, what we do, we have a team of computer scientists who are working with us, and they detect misinformation online, and sort of to understand how it spreads on social media platforms. And then we also look at how which kind of people shares this kind of information. We also look at if what are some ways to sort of help in the some ways to kind of I don't want to use the word correct, but sort of give accurate information in these kind of situations. And so here you will see, this is a sort of a figure where it's, as you can see, on there's a red dot and a yellow and a green on the left-hand side, at least for me, left-hand side, where you see 7 misinformation tweeters. So this is data from Twitter, and so there's 7 misinformation, sort of 7 accounts which is spreading this particular misinformation at one time, and these 7 accounts have other sort of retweets, which are 5, and then there are 2105 misinformation followers, and so sort of from that initial 7 accounts, it spreads to 2,000 people. So it's an example, and you can see on the right side, that is a diagram or a figure of how those nodes are connected, and how sort of that sort of misinformation can spread and reach other people. And then from that first, when what I showed was those 7, it grew to 63. So, as you're seeing, the figure also becomes, as it becomes larger, you can see more nodes are connected, more people are connected to each other, because when I share something, the 15 people who maybe follow me see, and then someone else shares, and so on and so forth. So then at this point, when 63 people are tweeting and retweeting, the misinformation is reaching around 13,000 people, 13,500 people. Then it grows to about 72, and that spreads to about 35,000 people. And as you can see, the network becomes thicker and bigger and more and more. And this is ultimately, I mean, it can of course go on and on, but this is a time when 49,700, almost 50,000 people were exposed to that misinformation, which was at the beginning spread only by 7 people. So this is where social media becomes sort of really a powerful tool in spreading information that is false, as well as information that that is accurate. So it's a tool that can be used, of course, to spread false information as well. And then I will talk about a few examples next. I'm sure many of you have been have been reading, have been exposed to misinformation, have been seeing a lot of headlines that look like this. Because election season is coming, there's a lot of talk about how misinformation could be a big problem this year, with AI being more, being more and more advanced, and things like that. So there's a lot of anticipation and about how this can be a big issue in our elections. So one example, I'll just share a few examples, and I'm sure if you're aware of some of these. So there was a lot of attention given around in August of this year, when there was a rumor that was spread across multiple social media platforms, that when ballots are marked by poll workers with some sort of like a check mark or a letter or a star or R or D or some sort of writing, that this could disqualify that ballot. And so it started with a text, which, as you can see on the right-hand side, it started with a text that was sent, and that text sort of got shared on social media, and the whole rumor became a big deal. And however, a lot of sort of fact-checking organizations and other news organizations obviously interviewed poll workers and others, and it seems like this is not true, and that usually poll workers do not make any marks, and even if there is a mark, that doesn't actually matter while counting, while it doesn't disqualify the votes, disqualify the vote. There were also a lot of attention given to when this sort of became that immigrants in certain place in Ohio were hurting pets, but a lot of fact checks, again, through news organizations as well as other sort of bipartisan fact checkers also interviewed government officials in Springfield, Ohio, or talked to people, and the conclusion is that is not true. And looking at globally, just a quick one or two quick examples. In elections in India, which happened this year between April and June, there was a lot of mis and disinformation online, particularly Facebook, and these accounts which were formed by people. These were business accounts that were formed, and these were not actual, real people or people who were opening these accounts just to spread misinformation, and became pretty significant during the elections. And Facebook failed to verify those accounts and let it be for the course of the elections, which got a lot of criticism from within the country as well as outside. Another sort of example, which seems like, and I obviously, these are all from not my first-hand knowledge as such. This all comes from what you read on in the news website, news organizations. One of them were in Taiwan. That their elections during January 2024 have been considered what's the word I'm looking for? Considered sort of a case study, which worked, which sort of worked because citizens helped in sort of trying to block the spread of misinformation. They formed their own fact-checking organizations. They made YouTube videos which were shared online and showing how votes are counted, how trying to verify things which was true or not true. And this is sort of became headlines saying that Taiwan was able to fight back some of the misinformation through the help of with the help of citizens. So we've been talking a lot about how misinformation spreads and what kind of spreads and what are some of the examples. So what are some of the consequences? Why do we care so much about misinformation and disinformation? What kind of what could they do to us? And some of this might sound a little more academic, and I apologize for that. But I mean, it's generally what it talks about is that they could impact our decision making. They could impact voting decisions in elections. They could impact trust that we have in governmental organizations, or they could sort of intensify ideological polarizations and distrust in government, distrust in media outlets. Any sort of authoritative institutions could be distrusted because of mis and disinformation. And these are pretty important sort of outcomes of negative outcomes, obviously, of mis and disinformation. Distrust in experts and public health sort of officials, and a lot of the time during COVID and others, there was a lot of research showed that people distrusted because of misinformation, because people were not sure of what is true and what is not true, and who to believe and who not to believe, which is frankly, with so much of information around us, is not surprising. Another sort of beyond these impact on our attitudes and behaviors, there are also long-term impact of exposing yourself to mis and disinformation. So what happens is, once we have some sort of misperceptions in our mind, or once misinformation takes hold of us, it is really difficult to obliterate that sort of that negative impact. There's a lot of research that shows that misinformation not only stays in our memory, but it continues to sort of discourage us from believing something other than the misinformation. So it continues to discourage positive perceptions, attitudes, and behaviors. And we continue to sort of believe in that because they take hold of you, and these kind of conspiracy theories and misinformation. Those who hold misperceptions often demonstrate a pattern of repeated susceptibility. So you become more vulnerable. So you believe in one sort of false information, it is possible that you'll be more vulnerable to believe something else, which could be connected or might not be. But a lot of times, these conspiracy theories are connected to each other. And so that long-term impact, it can be quite detrimental when we talk about mis and disinformation. So, and I mean, I'm just trying to keep a sort of eye on my time. And then, so those were sort of what are the negative impacts. And then next, I'll talk a little bit about why we may believe in misinformation. And this is a question I get a lot from people. Why do you think people believe in misinformation? Why is it that people are not able to decipher what is factual and what is accurate and what is not accurate? And I often say this, that it is actually not that easy to decipher accurate from not accurate. It is. What I mean to say is that it is very easy to fall for misinformation. It's not necessary that all of us will fall for the same types or same misinformation. But there are times when, in spite of knowing a lot about some topics, we might not know about something else. And so there are a lot of times it's pretty easy for us to fall for misinformation. And so again, this is also getting a little more academic than I would like it to be, but to think about social psychology and how we explain why we believe in misinformation is one way to think about is that once we are exposed to some sort of misinformation, we might forget certain original details. We could forget others that we knew before, but then we saw this new information, which is not necessarily factual, and then we forget about some other original details. And then it activation-based model of memory, so which kind of talks about how when we are exposed to misleading information, that could activate certain memories, and that could resonate with information. And so again, sometimes we may forget factual details. So there's a whole history of sort of research and literature in social psychology that talks about why people might fall for this kind of information so easily and continue to believe them. And then repeated exposure, right? So repeatedly, when you keep seeing misinformation about something, it becomes more and more and more harder for people to debunk that misinformation, because you sort of start believing in it, and you kind of forget about certain other details. And another one of those sort of, again, simply put, motivated reasoning means we tend to believe our side. So we tend to believe what we already think is our belief, whether it is social ideology, political ideology, whatever, however we believe in a certain issue, certain topic, we always find information that is congruent to our side to be true. And so that sort of makes us, it makes it difficult for us when we are exposed to misinformation. It makes us difficult for us to not fall for it, because we already have certain pre-existing attitudes, and then we see something which falls in place with that pre-existing attitude, then we completely trust that, we completely believe in it, and that makes it again very, very difficult to move away from it. So yeah, something like, this sort of motivated reasoning is pretty powerful when we talk about misperception formation. So as I said, if you agree with it, you kind of think it is true. If not, then perhaps it is not. So as I was saying, it is easy for us to fall for misinformation. So what can we do? I know we've been talking, I'm talking about a lot about the problems, but what can we do to protect ourselves, or protect our community, protect our society? And one of the questions, again, that I get very often is, do fact-checking work? Well, it depends. Will fact-checking, will people believe something that is fact-checked? Among research shows that among many of the solutions that are posed by misinformation problems, fact-checking seems to be one of those which get a lot of attention, which seems to show to change or lower misperceptions. And it suggests that fact-checking, it tends to reduce misperceptions overall, but it might not be the case all the time. Again, going back to that idea of motivated reasoning, if we completely trust the misinformation, or trust the person who is spreading the disinformation, then it becomes difficult, in spite of fact checking, to believe the information which is accurate. So a lot of my research sort of works on something like this, where citizens take the trouble, or citizens take it upon themselves to share information that is accurate, or correct people, or give them accurate information, or tell them that this is misinformation, or this is not true, or however way it is done. And that's called social correction, right? So we, as citizens, we try to sort of give each other correct information, or give each other accurate information. And so social correction research shows that one way for that to be impactful, or one way for that to be people to believe you, would be to be civil. It's very, very important that people talk to each other with civility, without being confrontational, showing empathy and humility. This is empathy and humility is one big one, which we just recently did some research, and which shows that when people talk to others with empathy about false information, people tend to trust them and believe the information that is given to them, as factual. And providing facts with links and other materials is always helpful as well, provided that those links are accurate. And so there are many sort of ways of, if you see something which is not true on your social page, what do you do? So different ways of doing that. One other way, definitely cross-checking sources. Multiple sources across party lines. I always say that it is always nice to see what the other side is saying. Or I know sometimes it can be tough. Sometimes, particularly during a season like election season, where a lot of the information is pitted against each other, and our side and your side and their side, kind of a thing. But it always helps to go to multiple sources, whether they are politically inclined. You could have a variety of sources. That's what is helpful, to have multiple sort of cross-checking sources to cross-check. People who reflect as in, you think a little before sharing something. You think about that information that you just read and think about it. Can this be true? Or is my judgment getting a little influenced by who I want to vote for, or who I have always trusted? Or can the person I have always trusted politically could also lie? Those are questions that you want to ask, and you want to reflect upon. The reflective judgment is a big one, because you don't want to instantly believe something that you see. You want to make sure you've thought through it and then sort of trust that information. Media literacy, I'm sure a lot of you have heard of that. It always helps to know how media is created, what it means, how sometimes that also might not be true. Always going back to the source. Who is the source? Where is the information coming from? Being aware of everything that you're reading online is extremely important, to make sure that you're getting information that is accurate. Lots of fact-checking sources out there. A lot of them are non-partisan, and it helps to check these. If you still cannot find information which is accurate, a lot of times these fact checkers go interview people, find information, and then kind of come to a conclusion whether something is true or not. And so might help to sort of check those. Those are things that we can do. Of course, organizations have their own sort of role to play in this. News media organizations have a huge responsibility in this, so that they don't, they take extra precautions to not spread conspiracy theories or false information, or even if by mistake something happens, take it back immediately and make sure they give the accurate information. Social media platforms also have to be very vigilant about this, and make sure there are not, about groups and accounts that spread disinformation. So it's not something, I always say, it's not something that only one thing is going to solve this problem. And it's not a problem that can be completely. So there will never be a time there will be no misinformation. It has always been, that's the first thing. That's why I started in the beginning, that history tells us that there has always been false information. It has always been used to manipulate, for political propagation, whatever it might be. But if we take multi sort of, we use these different sort of strategies, that kind of an approach, then maybe there is at least some hope to to lessen it, not eradicate, not have it at all, but to lessen the amount of misinformation that we see. And for ourselves, we really need to look after ourselves, to think about ourselves, because it can be pretty it can be pretty dangerous. I mean, I have done a lot of, and again, because of time, I don't talk too much about my research, but I had done some interviews with WSU students, young adults, and remember talking to them during COVID and how worried they were about misinformation and how it was affecting their mental health, because mis and disinformation can impact our mental health, because because that confusion can never be good for us, and we all want to have information that is accurate. And so I would leave with you with that, and sort of again, thank you for joining us and joining me for my talk, joining us for our talk, and I would love to take questions. And I'm going to stop sharing here. Okay, all right.
Hey, so we've got some questions coming in, Puri, but as the chair, I'm gonna jump in and take advantage, ask a couple questions myself first, and other people, if you want to add also, just send chat either directly to me or in the, like some people also putting it in the regular meeting chat. So, and it would be to the administrator. So the first question I had to ask for you is, as sort of a political scientist, thinking about the whole idea of freedom of speech, the founders didn't think that all information was true, right? And so they thought, but if we have free speech, there'd be a marketplace of ideas, and rational people would be examining this, and they would discard the bad information, and the good information would rise up. And like you said, the bad information would never disappear, but it would not be able to compete in a marketplace against the better ideas that are based on logic and good evidence. But based on what you say, it sounds like today we're living in a world where bad information actually has some advantages. That you mentioned all the reasons why people might be more likely to believe it, and how evidence shows it's more likely to spread. And so given that this is sort of a problem for our system's assumptions about how free speech could also be compatible with people rejecting bad information, but it seems like in some ways that's not working in some ways very well right now. Are there things that we can do at the government level to promote a system where it preserves free speech, but it also empowers people to better discriminate between these? And are there any governments that have put in place programs to help people deal with misinformation effectively?
Yeah, that's a great question. I wish I could answer. I mean, I wish I could have a answer to that question. I wish I could have a sort of a problem to that solution. But could government do something? I think yes, and I think they do. I mean, I think making taking an approach where kids, even in school, are learning not necessarily about misinformation, but about how to find information that is accurate, or how do you, so basically putting more emphasis on information that is factual and accurate, I think can be quite helpful. And learning that from an age where that you are aware, and like I said, awareness is one of the first things. And if we and if you start early in schools, that can be pretty helpful. By the time we have students in college, I teach some of these courses in mis and disinformation for our college. A lot of time, some of the students are getting exposed to a lot of these tools at the college level, and but it's becoming more and more common in schools too. So that would be, I think, one of the things that would be really important. Government having sort of strategies where they are able to push information that is accurate and factual would always be helpful. But then one of the sort of problems with that is, a lot of times we tend not to believe the other side. So so if your side of whoever you believe, whether you are, whoever you vote for or whoever is your person in politics, you tend to trust information coming from there. But if you're on the other side, then information coming from the government a lot of times become thought, even if it is actual, even if it is factual, could be thought of as, oh, that's just politics, because I don't trust you, I didn't vote for you, I don't trust you. It becomes really complicated at that level. But nonprofits, non-bipartisan organizations could take more sort of hands-on, I guess, work at the community level, where you actually include people to fight this problem. And there's a lot of sort of research that shows community-based programs can be pretty important in this, because coming from the government could be a little elitist, and it could be hands down, it's coming from above that I don't trust. But at the community level, if we are working together, sometimes it could work. But that's a great question, John. I wish I could have a more optimistic answer to that.
Well, no, still, that's a lot of good. I've got a lot of stuff written after that was good. Thank you. And I just have one more question, and I promise I'll turn over to some of the people in the audience who have some questions that they've submitted. My second question has to do with sort of the other side of it, because you mentioned misinformation and disinformation. And disinformation presumably are people who are intentionally spreading untrue things for whatever reason. And you mentioned like the bots in India, about 20%. Do we know, for people who do want to spread something that's untrue, do we know how effective that can be? Do we know how much their efforts have an impact?
Oh, well, it depends. Depends on how much exposure that bot has, or a person, because that's what in the beginning, when I showed those graphs of how it spreads, if someone who's, let's say, the account doesn't have many followers or is not connected to those nodes, it might not be that powerful. But if somebody who is very well connected, that is why when disinformation is spread by political influencers or politicians themselves, it can be pretty damning, because a lot of people follow them or trust them. So it all depends on that source, right? So where is it coming from, and how much reach that particular source has. And a lot of times bots do have, they buy followers, and they do all kinds of things to get those connections, and then spread the disinformation.
Oh, okay. All right. So now I'll turn it over to some of the people who've been submitting comments to us. And first, I have a question from Tony, and it's about Wikipedia. Would you like to ask this question yourself, Tony? Okay, well, so I might just read this myself then. So I'm not hearing from you.
I'm reading it myself.
Oh, I can see. Okay, yes.
I can see it. Yeah, I can see it. I was just reading it.
And so for those who can't, do you want to read it for the?
Sure, I can read it. Sure.
Okay, okay.
So Tony's question is: I use Wikipedia quite a bit. How accurate is it viewed by the academic community? If it is seen as relatively free of disinformation, why does this group source? Why or how, I'm not sure, this group source model work? Okay, so great question. How much do we trust Wikipedia? Now, again, Wikipedia when it started, as you know, it is something that is run by citizens, right? So it started as a page, like a few people just writing up stuff about topics, and anyone and everyone can, in the beginning, anyone and everyone can go edit those pages. And just by this idea, I think it started in 2006, if I'm remembering correctly. Just by this idea, seems like it's going to be very chaotic, very messy, because anyone can go and write whatever they want. But for some reason, the models seem to work, and it worked to that extent that now they have moderators. They do control information that goes in there. Of course, it also, again, it depends on citizens to do that work, so it's not it might not be as efficient as if you could pay people to do that. But I think most of the information, I would say, is accurate, because they are fact checked. And so I often tell my students, ask this question a lot, and I often tell them that Wikipedia is fine if that's your first stop. Like, you want to find out about, I don't know, Abraham Lincoln, go to his page and read up. I mean, it's really, there's a whole lot of information there. But then move from there and read a book or read something else, or, it's Wikipedia by itself, the online might not be able to give you everything, but it still gives a lot of information. It is relatively free of mis and disinformation, that is for sure. I'm not sure if the question should be, how does this group source model work? And I think the model works because of that one cartoon I had shown, that a lot of people really take it to themselves to keep the internet free of misinformation, at least places like Wikipedia, and people invest a lot of time to do that. So that model somehow has worked in a lot of places. There can be obviously bad apples. There can be, there can be some pages which might have some misinformation. Some might play a prank or whatever, or give misinformation. But in general, I mean, I don't know how many of you use, for instance, if you are like, forget about politics or anything like that. Let's say we are trying to sort of go on vacation, and I'm pretty sure majority of us go look online for information related to where we want to go. Either it is TripAdvisor or whatever blogs and information that you get. And I would say majority of the time, I have never been misled by this information that I find online. Sometimes you will find about like a bus. This is the bus number that goes from this stop to this particular beach, and these are the timings. That is the kind of work that people do, and this is just people like us. I mean, and so sometimes it boggles my mind how that system works. We trust each other, and it works a lot of times. Yeah. So anyway, that was my answer to the Wikipedia question.
Yeah, thank you. That's one I get a lot too from students. So the next question is from Joan, and she asked me to read this. So she says, how well are the social media platforms doing to combat misinformation?
Good question. I don't think they're doing well. I don't know if they even want to do well. I mean, there was a time after the 2016 elections. I think there was a lot of pressure because of foreign sort of misinformation, disinformation online, or particularly Facebook. And there was a lot of sort of talk about that they will do, they will restrict some of this information and at least verify accounts. That is not restrict, that's not the right word, but verify accounts which might cause, which might spread mis and disinformation. But I think, I don't know, at this point, I'm not too confident that they do enough, or they are doing the kind of verification that is supposed to be done. And I think it is pretty complex sort of landscape, and unless social media giants like Facebook and Twitter. Twitter, of course, now Twitter has gone online and said that they are not going to be doing that. So, I mean, we know that they're not actively trying to, take any of these accounts out or anything like that. So it's a pretty complex landscape, really, and I don't think they're doing enough. That is just my personal opinion, of course.
Okay, so the next question, and this is from Jeff. Jeff, would you like to read this yourself?
Yeah, sure thing.
Okay.
First, thank you for all this. It's been very informative.
Sure.
What stuck out to me was looking at the fact that long-term exposure leads to more believability in this disinformation. When you look at actors such as the CCP, DPRK, Russia, and the sheer volume of information that they're pouring on the population, when do you or we notice that turning point, such as what happened with the elections in Taiwan, where that large-scale fact-checking almost needs to be implemented?
Oh, here in the US? Something like that. Yeah. I really don't know if that model will be successful here in the US. We could perhaps, I mean, social correction, yes, it works, but this question that John asked in the beginning about freedom of speech, there is a lot of it's complicated here to have fact check organizations and actually go sort of very strictly on fact checking and take information out that you think is because that sort of borderlines with freedom of speech, and so the respect for freedom of speech in the country, which is wonderful. Maybe that's the downside to some extent, that because people respect so much freedom of speech, and there might be some resistance to very strong sort of fact checking and again deleting stuff or deleting accounts and things like that, which are done in some countries. But I don't know if that will be successful in the US. And this is just my understanding of how, it's because that's also complex, right? Even if the one that worked in Taiwan, now that's a newer democracy, smaller university. What am I saying? Smaller country. So some things that works there might not work in a big sort of country like the US. And so yeah, like everything else, where again has the pros and cons, maybe that's where so this becomes a little more complicated in a country.
We're going to have to learn and work through it together as it goes, sort of situations.
Yes, and that's why I think I again think more at the community level could be useful, like smaller communities getting together to help their own. I might be more than some very sort of bigger fact-checking organizations telling you what to do and telling you what's right and wrong, sort of thing.
Awesome.
So I was going to jump in and ask a question. Just listening to this talk, we're in the middle of a presidential campaign, as you have probably heard, and listening to all this, I'm always kind of thinking that in terms of this election. And I know that the election's not over, and so the data and the facts and stuff are maybe not clear. But just as an expert in this area, watching this as it unfolds, how does the problem of misinformation, disinformation in this campaign compare to previous years? Is it kind of the same level of concern as before? Is it worse? Have people found ways to make it better? What is your estimate as someone who studies this, looking from the outside?
Yeah, again, great question. It's hard to say if it is worse or not, just because empirically difficult to test. But I think it would be worse because we have more tools now. Because the tools get so what happens with these kind of situations is that as we with social media, with AI, all of these tools that we have because of advancement in technology, makes it has such a good side, right? Gives us more information, gives us I mean, 50 years ago, I'm guessing we could we could never think of so much information just by logging in, which we have now. But at the same time, the same tools make it easier for people who want to spread disinformation, people who want to destroy trust and in democracy and such. It also becomes easier. So AI is far more advanced than 2020 and 2016. So it's become anything that is from information that is created by them, or visuals, and everything is looks more realistic than it was even 6 months ago. So it becomes far more complicated, right? Because of that. So the more advanced we get with the tools, it's great for so many things. AI can be very, very useful for so many things we can do with it. But yet at the same time, it can also be used for creating mis and disinformation, spreading mis and disinformation, making it look more accurate. So I mean, yeah, it can be. It's probably getting worse, but maybe people will learn to sort of navigate this more as they are getting more and more exposed to mis and disinformation. That could be too.
Hey, so we're coming up close to the time, so I'm just going to read 2 more questions from the audience and then let you go
Sure.
to continue the evening. And thank you for coming. And so the second to last question is from John, and he asked me to read this, a different John than me. If you had the chance, would you change the freedom of speech? And if so, how and why?
Again, this is one of those things, the good and the bad, right? Just as I was talking about AI or technology. I mean, would I change it? I don't think it's a really big question. I don't think I would, but I mean, the respect for, and the need for freedom of speech is exceptionally important. We all should have the right to speak out. We all should have the right to say what we want to. But at the same time, we should not hide behind the freedom of speech to spread disinformation. Now, that's a really big problem. Just using freedom of speech as sort of as an excuse to say, well, I have the right to say whatever I want, whether it's factual or not. Now, that could be a problem. So that's the balance, I mean, where we need to understand and think about the future and think about our children and think about what they are going to be facing against, because it's getting worse, and it is for each generation to help and to help and safeguard democracy and trust. Yeah. So yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. And last question, and this one also that I've been asked to read this. With instances of misinformation, is it easy to trace the source and know whether it is actually disinformation, intentional?
Oh, that's such a great question. Yes, most times, yes, because if it is spread on social media, usually there will be a source, whether like the example I was showing you of that, the ballots, writing on the ballots, that came from a text message, and you can, and it was shared. It was a screenshot, and you can sort of trace back. And a lot of times, this detection work that is done, that computer scientists and other social scientists do, when we look at social media data, it is possible to go back and link to the person who might have been the first one to spread that information. If it is politicians, it's very easy. But even if it is not, even if they are, one of us is spreading that information, it's easy to go and check. But sometimes this mis and disinformation is taken down for various reasons. Then you might not find. But whether the particular misinformation is a piece of disinformation or not, as in if somebody is spreading it with a purpose, will depend on who the source is, right? So if a piece of information that comes to you and you are not sure whether it is true or not, and you want to go back to the source and see who's spreading it, and you don't know who the source is, I mean, it just helps a little bit to Google and see, and again, go back to those fact checking, perhaps some of those sites to look and see what they are saying, and that might sort of give you some information about. And a lot of times it's also possible to see where, a lot of these sites that looks like news sites, but they're actually not news sites. Yeah, just poking a little bit usually gives you a sense of what's misinformation, and it has, if it has been kind of spread intentionally by someone.
Okay, well, thank you very much. You've told us a lot of stuff that's frankly kind of concerning, but I'm at least reassured that we have researchers like you working on this. So that is something that is reassuring to me somewhat, for I hope that maybe we'll find a way to deal with this. And so I'd like to, on behalf of all of the World Affairs Council and everyone here, I would like to give you a round of applause and thank you. So I guess I'm done with my sound on, so it'll be only.
That's all right. Thank you very much. Yeah, no, thanks for inviting me. This is really fun to come and speak to you all. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, and thank you all for coming out for our talk tonight.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
have a great evening.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Bye.